Thank you so much. I'm happy to be with you. Wish it was in person, but that's the life we're all leading these days. So we'll do what we can virtually. Um, as Asha said, I graduated from Cal State East Bay in 1989 and had gone there in 88 and 89. I did junior college prior to that, leading up to Cal State East Bay. And when I graduated, I'm a business administration major with an emphasis in finance, and I wanted to manage money. That was my thinking when I came out of school. I'd had an investment class that I really liked, actually at Cal State East Bay. So I give credit where credit is due. It was a professor there that really piqued my interest in investments. But at the time, nobody was hiring someone to manage money straight out of school with a bachelor's degree. So I figured, let me find an asset manager that I would want to work at. And if I can find an entry-level position to come into the firm, then once I'm there, I can maneuver my way around and try to move into a portfolio management position. So that was kind of my strategy. And I interviewed on campus with Wells Fargo Investment Advisors, who was the asset management arm of Wells Fargo Bank at that time. That firm actually no longer exists, but at the time it was the asset management arm of Wells Fargo Bank. And they had a fund accounting position open. So I applied for that position, interviewed, and got that job and came into Wells Fargo Investment Advisors. And fund accounting was really accounting for the portfolios that are being managed on behalf of the clients. So you're booking trades, you're making sure that income is accruing, you're booking dividends and creating a net asset value at the end of every day. And it ended up being a great job because I was able to learn from the portfolio managers why they were doing trades. So I would talk with them when they were doing trades about why, so I could understand how to book those trades in the portfolio. And then I was working with operations around the settlement of those trades to make sure that, again, that they were being booked appropriately. And I was working with the client relationship and salespeople because they were the ones bringing in money from new clients. And so to make sure that I knew when money was coming in. So it was it was a really nice spot to be in because I learned a lot about the firm and what the various roles were across the firm. In any case, after 2 years, an entry-level portfolio management position opened up and I applied for that job. And at that time, anybody who managed money in the firm had to interview with the CEO. And so I interviewed with the CEO probably, early in my career. It was certainly one of the scarier interviews I had, but I must have passed muster because I did get that job and started managing international equities. So that was my first money management experience. In 1991 is when I started managing money. And at that time, we were managing money in about 18 countries, just to give you some idea of what that means in terms of international equity, all developed markets, mostly Europe and Asia. And again, I learned a lot from that job. I learned the different intricacies of markets, how stock trades in those markets, started meeting with clients, so got the face-to-face with clients, et cetera, and loved it. About 4 years after being in that position, my manager left. And at that time, our group was about 5 people, just to give you an idea of, it wasn't a huge group. And so I thought, well, I'm sure I can manage this group. So I popped into my boss's office and said, hey, I know Ellen is leaving and I think I, can manage this group. I'd like the opportunity to take Ellen's position when she leaves. And my boss's boss started asking me questions, okay, so what would be your strategy? What would be your long-term strategy? What would be your short-term strategy? What are some of the first things you would do? What would you change? What do you think's running well? And I have to tell you, it was one of my first failures in that I was not at all ready for those questions. And I didn't get the management job that time. I did mumble my way through the questions, but a huge, huge learning. And one of the first lessons I will leave you with is to be prepared when you are asking for a promotion, a new role, transfer into a new department, more responsibility, to get the cool project, to make more money, whatever it is, be prepared. Because had I thought more about the fact that I was asking this question and started really thinking about, well, what's my manager going to want in terms of hiring someone to come in and do this job, I could have been a lot more prepared, and I just wasn't. Now, you fast forward a year, the person that they had take that role left after about a year. I kind of got lucky, to be honest with you. And this time I went in and asked for the job, and I was completely prepared. I had a plan for kind of the first 100 days of what I would do with the group. I had a plan for longer term. I had some thoughts on the changes I would make. I had some thoughts on product development and what I wanted to do in terms of, potentially introducing new portfolios, et cetera. And so I did get the job that time. I will tell you that over the years, I never let that happen again. And there were a lot of times, you find in your career, there's a lot of times that you ask for something, whether it's an increase in compensation or it's, like I said, a new role, or you want to, potentially take over a part of another department and move it into yours, or whatever it is. And that was a huge learning early in my career. And like I said, I never let it happen again. And I have given that advice again and again to people is, if you're going in to talk to your boss, and even if you're not asking for something specific, but you are meeting with your boss, you should be prepared, period, in terms of, what you want to get out of that meeting. And I think a lot of times it's a missed opportunity if you're going in there and just thinking you're going to have a casual conversation. Like you should have a purpose for being in that room. So 4 years later, after I had started managing the team, so I was the manager for the international equity team, I was asked to take over domestic equity, which is the US equity business. So it's only one country versus, managing 18 countries, but the US market is a massive market compared to other markets. And we had a lot more money in terms of assets under management. We had a lot more clients. And probably one of the biggest differences is that you're trading during the day. So when you're managing international equities, you create trade lists. You hand them off to a trader, typically in New York City, who then, pushes them out to Japan or London, et cetera. And you go home, and when you come in the morning, you find out how your trades went. So what got done, what didn't get done, et cetera. When you're trading US equities, you're trading live, and you are making changes throughout the day in terms of trading strategy, depending on what's happening in the market. So much larger asset base, more clients, bigger portfolios, and live trading. So a very different dynamic, even though I'd managed money at that point for 6, 7, 8 years. Moving into managing US equities was another just huge learning. And I want to share another story on that, because when I was first asked to manage domestic equity, initially that team was not doing well. They had just moved on to a new technology platform. They had made a few bad hires, so they had some personnel problems. The manager was never around. He was constantly traveling, or I'm not even sure, but there was problems with absenteeism from the standpoint of the manager. And a number of other issues related to the fact that they had just implemented a new system platform. So initially I had said no to taking that position. And my boss came back to me and he said, no, really, we want you to take this position. And I said, gosh, my group is running so smoothly. Like, what that by then I had hired almost everybody in the group. I'd been managing it for several years. We had also implemented a new technology solution, but it was running smoothly. And he said, no, that's why we want you to come in and manage domestic equities, because uh, we know that you've succeeded in your group on that where we haven't here. So we really think you can do it. Now, I will also tell you, I was pregnant with my second son. So I was taking on a group that was a mess, to be completely honest, at that time. And pregnant and getting ready to go out on maternity leave. And I knew that I was going to have to fire a few people. I knew that I would be a lot of long hours, et cetera. But my manager, basically convinced me to take the job. And looking back, that was probably one of the more pivotal moments in my career. And I think really led to the rest of my career. If I had really continued to say no and hadn't have done that, I'm not sure where my career would have gone. But the fact that I ended up taking on that position, I ended up fixing the problems in that group. It took a while. It wasn't easy. There's no doubt. But I fixed those problems, and I became known as a manager that could turn around a group and get it back on track for success. And so another big kind of moment was that realization that sometimes you have to take risks in order to further your career. And I just look back on that and remember how much I did not want to take that job, because I just knew how messy it was going to be. And I think if my manager hadn't really pushed me, I would have walked away from it. And in hindsight, I really don't think I'd be where I am today. So I would say, beyond taking risks, I would also say, if someone else is pushing you and they have the faith in you of doing the position, I think sometimes we doubt ourselves. Men and women both. This is not, unique to women by any means, but I think women tend to have a tendency to doubt themselves more. I would say, don't doubt yourself and take the risk, because for me, it definitely paid off. And when I look at that now, what that led to, so I had managed international equity, I'd managed domestic equity. They asked me to take the combined group. So I had the full portfolio management equity team here in the US in San Francisco. And then that happened in 2006. And then in 2008, they asked me to take the global position, which expanded my responsibilities to include London. We had a small office in Munich, Tokyo, and Hong Kong. So my job went from managing international equity to managing US equities, which I didn't want to do, but ended up taking that risk, which then springboarded me into being able to take on a broader business in the US and then become a global business. And that one decision of going ahead and taking the domestic equity position, I think really allowed me to springboard into the other positions. So from there, the global business, is a completely different thing, because you'll get up in the morning and you have meetings with London at 6, 7, 8 a.m. are your meetings with London, and then they go home, and then you're doing your US business, and then at the end of the day you're on the phone with Asia. And so that you really learn to balance during that time, because you can't, I mean, you can do them both on the same day, but you have to kind of like, I'm going to do my London calls on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, and I'm going to try to do my Asia meetings on Monday and Wednesday, so that you have, um, you have to manage whatever's put in front of you, and what worked yesterday doesn't always work today. And I learned a lot about just, let's just try this. And if that doesn't work, then we'll try that. But the global business is tough because of the time zones that you're managing. And, I have been woken up in the middle of the night because of something that was going on in Tokyo, and, they needed me, and you're, trying to, wake up and have a phone call and make a decision about something that's happening, at 3 o'clock in the morning. So it's, but it also, it also allowed me to be on the Blackrock executive committee. So, um, you know, as I said, I started with Wells Fargo Investment Advisors. That company was bought by Barclays Bank. So we became Barclays Global Investors. And then that company was bought by BlackRock. So that was the career progression in terms of the corporate entities, but it was the same firm the entire time. It was just bought a few times. I had different business cards, but was always working in the same firm. And when BlackRock bought Barclays Global Investors, I was also asked to be on the Global Executive Committee for BlackRock. And the Global Executive Committee was the 22 most senior business leaders in the firm. The firm at that time was about 12,000 people. So 22 people is not very many to have on an executive committee. And that committee was really responsible for determining firm-wide strategy. So more broadly across all of the products, firm-wide strategy, risk management, budget allocation, and talent management. So, how we promote people, et cetera. And both of those things, the combination of the global business, running a global business, and being on an executive committee, which is in some ways like being on a board, in many cases, only an internal board, is what allowed me to then move into board work once I left BlackRock. So I left BlackRock in 2017 and started looking for a board position immediately. And my first board position, which I would never have guessed when I started looking for a board position, is a company in London called Intermediate Capital Group. And I'm still on that board. So I've been on that board for 3 years now, a little more than 3 years. And, again, part of it, it's funny, you look back at your career journey, and some of the things that you did as you moved throughout your career kind of end up positioning you for where you are now. So one of the things that they were really impressed by was the fact that I understood the regulatory environment in London. And the reason I understood the regulatory environment is because I'd had a global position and we managed money in London. So everything ends up fitting together somehow in the end. You don't realize where it's leading, as you're moving through it. But, all the experiences that you gain, give you a background and the ability to, move through your career over time. So I want to talk a little bit about leadership and management, and what does it take in terms of being a leader or a manager. And I think, Asha, can we do a time check? You want me to go for about five more minutes, something like that, 5 to 7 more minutes?
That'd be great.
Okay. So, okay, what does it take? So I was thinking about this. What does it take to be a good leader or a good manager of people? And they are two different things. But I think first is providing direction and a strategic direction for the team that you're managing. If you're managing a team, you have to let them know where you're going, what your view is. So what do you want to get done this year? So that they understand how they fit into the team and what role they can play in order to get you from A to Z throughout the year. And I think that's one of the most important things. And I think sometimes managers and leaders don't do a very good job of it. They have in their own mind where they want to go, what they want to get done that year, but they don't share it. or they share it in such a way that it's almost nondescript and people have a hard time attaching themselves to it. So I would say, whether it's on, like I used to always think every year about client segmentation. So what clients do we really want to go after this year? What kind of products do we want to develop this year? What kind of products should we be selling given the current market environment? But you've got to make sure that everybody knows those things that you're thinking about as you move into the year. The second thing that I would say, and I have said this multiple times, so anybody who's heard me talk before probably has heard it, but manage your team. I place a huge amount of emphasis in managing your team. I have said before, if you manage your team well, your team will manage your business. So if your team knows what you want them to do and where you're going, and you're managing them well in terms of getting to know them, et cetera, then the team will manage your business for you in many ways. And, I used to do walk-arounds. So I would have specifically, my assistant would put on my calendar once or twice a week, a half an hour to do walk-arounds. And I would get up and walk around the trading floor and talk to my portfolio managers, see how they're doing, what are they working on, what challenges they might have, et cetera. And when I would travel globally, so when I'd go to the London office, for instance, I would make sure, because I'm only in London a couple of times a year, I would make sure that I would talk to every single person on the team before I would leave. And I'd purposely, walk around and I'd kind of keep track of who I'd talk to. And then sometimes it'd be, 5 or 10 minutes. And for some people, it might be more like an hour, depending on what they were working on. But I think manage your team is just a huge lesson. And then I would say, be curious, always be learning this. I think one of the reasons that leaders are successful is because they continue to learn throughout time. And, I continue to learn today. I mean, I am constantly reading. So I'm on the AIG board. It's an insurance company. I have no insurance background whatsoever, but I am learning a lot about insurance. And you have to keep yourself current in whatever role you're in whatever industry you're in. You should know something about your competitors and what they're doing. You should know what other groups are doing in your company that you work in, et cetera. I mean, you have to you have to be curious. Natural curiosity is a really good thing. I would say stay current and be curious. And then the last couple minutes, I wanted to just say a couple things about the Women's Network. As Asha knows, I've been involved in developing women leaders for a long time. In 2005 is when I actually started looking at developing the Women's Network. At that time, we were Barclays Global Investors. But I will, I'll tell you the moment when I started it, and it was, there was a firm-wide meeting, and we had the 9 senior business leaders on the stage in 2005, and they were all white males on the stage. And I sat there looking at them going, oh my gosh, if you're just coming into this firm, like you're wondering whether you have a career here, whether you have the opportunity, whether you can reach the top, et cetera. And so I kind of walked away from that and gathered a group of women from different groups across the firm and said, hey, what do you think about starting a women's network? And, if we did that, what does that mean? We did conversations with Goldman Sachs and Deloitte, who were the 2 firms at the time who had a pretty good women's group, and decided that we were going to focus on 2 things, that we were going to focus on providing women with the toolkit to manage their careers, and that we're going to provide them with networking opportunities to get to know each other better. And the toolkit, just to come back to that, it was things like negotiation skills, art of the ask. We would set up mentoring programs, Oh, any number of, how presence. So how to have presence when you walk into a room, et cetera. And that was our initial focus. We always treated it like a business. We did not want to be seen as kind of a frivolous group of girls that were, just running around, getting together for a glass of wine or something. So we treated it like a business. But one of the biggest things was that we brought in the men across the company. So we purposely invited men as well. We never, even though it was the Women's Network, we never had it just for women. We invited the male managers. And as a matter of fact, the more male managers we had in the room, the better, because we felt like if they were interested in the topics that we were talking about, ideally they would recommend that their women come to our meetings. And so the male engagement was critical. And as a matter of fact, later on, probably 8 years into the Women's Network, I did a whole piece on what life is like for women when they show up at the firm and specifically rolled that out for our senior men in the firm, and did, groups of 10 men, and just talked about, when I show up every day at work, my experience is different than some of the men in the room. And there's a whole number of things that go on. I'm not going to go into them, but it's everything from not having your voice heard in meetings where you say something and nobody reacts, and then the guy next to you says the exact same thing, and all of a sudden everybody's thinks it's the greatest thing anyone's ever heard. It's things like having to leave early to take your kids to the doctor or pick them up. Women are kind of frowned on, whereas men do it. They're considered like the greatest dad ever. It's all these things that kind of happen. But I had conversations with men about that to kind of raise their awareness about what it means to be a woman in the workplace. And those ended up being really, really good conversations. Surprisingly, I was a little bit nervous about it. They ended up being really good conversations. So I have more, but I want to be conscious of time and make sure that people have questions. So the couple other thoughts that I have, I'll try to just weave them in through the questions, if that makes sense.